Welcome to another episode of Behind the Shield. Today is a return guest, Michael Schroeder, and he'll be talking about Zero Trust, giving a little bit of introduction about his company, and we'll just think about Zero Trust as one of the most kind of overused phrases in cybersecurity today. But Zero Trust is not really a product; it is simply a overall architecture. You can't get there by just adding, multi-factor authentication or replacing a VPN. It really is a different way of designing and operating an entire system, thinking about it from an entire architectural perspective. Maybe you can just do a quick introduction of who you are, what you're about real quick, and then maybe try to talk about that perspective.
I just want to add one thing to the last sentence you said. Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me back. It is an architecture. And the key is it's an architecture where trust is never inherited. That's like foundation number one in my mind is like, if you understand that, good. That's a good starting place. But yeah, I'm Michael Schroeder. I am Director of Strategy and Market Development at Accentium. Thanks for having me again. Our first podcast was a really great time, so I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Glad to have you back.
Thank you. And Accentium is a cybersecurity services provider to federal government. We're a 20-year-old company. It is our 20th year in operation. And we also are a FedRAMP recognized independent assessment service. And we work guiding folks in a few regulatory frameworks.
It sounds like we had some pretty good meetings this past week as well. It sounds like there's a lot of yin and yang going on between us as well. That makes sense.
Yeah, there certainly is. Yeah, there definitely is. I got my team, my leadership team, to take a look at XPU 40 today and have some questions for your team. It was a really great time. Very collaborative. Love.
What I really like nowadays is I find out about the meetings afterwards, which is really cool.
Yeah, that works great.
So maybe you can start. There is really thinking about that Zero Trust reality check about what it really is and what it really isn't. So maybe we can start there. So
yeah, so it's not a product. Right? This isn't a device you plug into the hardware and suddenly it does a thing. It's not a set of scripts that somebody's going to run once a week and everything's solved, right? It is architecture. It starts from the way the system's built. And it's, as I said, trust is never inherited, right? You start with a protection surface, where the data is, the applications, the assets, the services, right? And every single access decision, every time any component of the overall system or internal or external wants to access a resource, there's an integrity check of the source of the resource and identity is verified. Access and privilege are confirmed. And so it's who you are, what you need, and an important piece as well is for how long in Zero Trust. Folks working in federal space know that, there's a lot of controls that are time-based based on the FIPS 199 categorization of the system overall and the data in it. And so these are all keys to what Zero Trust really is. And it focuses on all the components, right? We can dive in. There's 5 pillars that CISA talks about, and then 3 components that run through all of them. And as a ground floor,
is it like a matrix that how it runs through them, or is it like the same kind of element and a component in each one of the pillars?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's an element of structure and principle and perspective, and those 3 components are visibility, automation, and then governance. Okay. So the 5 pillars: identity. You got devices, the network, applications and services, and then data, right? So each of those has to be worked in parallel, right? You can't have one component be perfect and the rest are not even addressed. And as you approach through this, that visibility, automation, governance run through all of them. And what it buys, practitioners, CSPs, agencies, right? It's when something does get in, it can't become or it's less likely, but less likely to become a big issue, because least privilege is a core principle as well, right? Which has been part of strong cybersecurity practices forever. And it's a way of reducing access to anything for everyone, which is important.
Forever.
Forever.
Right.
Yes.
Yep. The time limited as well. So,
Yeah.
so I love principles. I think I always talk about this. I'm a system engineer. I'm an architect. So I always like starting with frameworks and stuff like that. And what I really like a lot as well is the ability to do a gap assessment or a maturity assessment. To me, a gap assessment is pretty much the same thing as a maturity assessment. You just figure out how far you need to go in order to implement the overall structure. So, is there any frameworks out there for figuring out what kind of gaps you have, what kind of maturity you have in that in the zero trust framework?
Yeah. So in federal zero trust, right? Zero trust is a component
Yeah.
of commercial space as
That's
well,
what
but
we're
in
talking about,
federal
right? It's
space,
mostly federal, civilian, and Department of Defense here, right? So,
yeah, exactly. So
or Department of War, depends
everything,
on the
Department of
day.
War is the correct current terminology per the department itself.
Yep.
So yeah, it's interesting. There is the zero trust maturity model, which is put out by CISA, right? And it encompasses a wide array of trust activities and principles. Pre-show, we were talking about TIC 3.0 and information about that being released just yesterday at time of recording. So it is a yardstick by which successful compliance with the federal obligation to zero trust has been completed. And then on the other side of that, well, actually, before I move on the other side of it, but that's going to give principles for federal employees, for business owners and system owners to understand, for information system security officers to know what principles and workflows, what actions are required. It's not a guidebook. It's not going to tell them. The ZTMM is the overarching shape and size of zero trust in federal space. Implementation's been tough, right? And I do want to talk about the history of how it got here at some point, but implementation has been moving along forward for several years through NSA. They have the Zero Trust Implementation Guides, ZIGs, and there are a total of 4 phases planned there. 2 have been completed. And so this model is designed for those 5 pillars. Actually, the ZIGs use a different structure. I don't want to confuse it just yet. But you'll be able to address the zero trust maturity model, 5 pillars, and the 3 components that run through it by following the zero trust implementation guides. It's also not necessarily a step-by-step structure because there's latitude. There's got to be flexibility in the way these are implemented, because every single system inside of a federal agency and the interconnected systems of systems are all going to be different. So this is a big task. This is a very large task for agencies. And to my knowledge, not a single federal agency is fully compliant to the zero trust requirements and obligations that they currently have, which is an interesting situation.
So how would they know? I mean, do they have any kind of assessment programs in place? Is CISA doing assessments, or are you signing on a dotted line that basically says, "Hey, I've achieved these 5 things"?
Right. Good question. There's a few different ways this is being delivered because the agencies have such strong latitude for how they achieve the mission set before them. A lot of that is still in development, right? The agencies are still working. As I mentioned, NSA ZIGs are in phase 2 with 4 planned phases. And that's, I think, 3.5-ish years of phase 2 being in development. Maybe more like 4. So the reporting requirements are tied to legislature and obligations under federal law. There's an executive order 14028 from 2021 that mandated zero trust, right? OMB has a directive from M2209. There's the ZIGs coming out. There's Department of War has a zero trust strategy that leverages the NSA ZIGs, but also takes components of CISA ZTMM. And so since there isn't one singular solid full model that's fully deployed, there is not an assessment framework required for this. However, there are ways to assess the adherence here, right? Because we're talking about principles of action. Let's make a quick analogy to KSIs in FedRAMP 20X.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
Very much like that.
I think one of those is zero trust, by the way.
Yes, it is, because EO 14028 obligates agencies to adhere to it, right? Mm-hmm. So if the function expected out of the zero trust maturity model is achieved, then an assessor can verify and validate, right? And then we can have a process in future. Who knows what sort of input through RFI the agencies have, but in future, because this is also important to know. We didn't talk history, right? But we're past the deadlines.
Well, how did we get here? Yeah. So how did we get here? I think that's is also very key. So
yeah, we should circle back to that. So I do want to point out first and foremost that in federal space, zero trust, no one was doing it. It arrived as policy. It wasn't like some company came in and marketing.
So I mean, is there similarities between defense in depth and the zero trust, or?
Absolutely. And zero trust is beyond cultural. It's because it is an architectural idea. Defense in depth was a principle upon which zero trust was specified, right?
Yes.
So a colleague of mine, brilliant guy, Mel Peterman, he reached out to me after I had posted some information on LinkedIn, a big post with the history, and he educated me about the roots of zero trust going back way before mandates. And there was the Jericho Forum had deperimetization work, and then John Kindervag's formal model that he put out, the Forrester Zero Trust model. Right. So I dug into those a little bit, but that's the real functional, technical practitioner work roots of this that then got elevated in importance to the point where the federal agencies were seeing the importance, and an executive order was pushed. So that NIST published 800-207, right? That was like 2020. DID has been around a decade. Concepts of zero trust are about 2.5 to 3 years deep, being formalized. And then in 2021, the executive order 14028 came out, and agencies had to adopt zero trust the same way that other executive orders have come out, right? That's the origins of FedRAMP as an executive order.
Right.
So we've got EO 14028. OMB comes out with M2209, which is the directive. It is now strategy. Every federal civilian agency and DoD has measurable objectives. They got the 5 pillars to adhere to, the 3 principles that run through it all. Again, those pillars: identity, devices, networks, applications, and workloads. It's very innovative when it came out, because some of those components nobody had ever thought in a formalized way, like workloads. Like, we're just handing a job from one place to another. What's that going to matter? And why do we need an identity, a deep IAS, or
and look where we're at now.
Yeah. Yeah. Look where we're at now.
The cloud and AI and
indeed.
Yep.
So well, here's where it gets good. Okay. So sorry. OMB had this obligation to meet the zero trust principles by the end of fiscal year 2024. When they put that out in 22. And each instrument's doing a different job. NIST wrote the architecture, the EO set things into motion, the OMB built the strategy, zero trust maturity model comes out. It's doing the work of giving people a yardstick of what to measure. And on the defense side, right, DOW came out with their zero trust strategy. It carries the framework with NSA doing implementation. This is a multi-government agency. This is across the top end of our executive branch and our most competent technically strong agencies between CISA and NSA working together with DOW to create this so that the entire federal ecosystem becomes more protected, and where federal space follows, commercial space also does as well, for the customers. So the logic's consistent across all of these, right? And there's no implicit trust based on networking. There's on location. Every access gets checked. I love this time where 22 to 24, all of these agencies are coming together, and putting forward plans that work together hand in hand and get us to a point where here, while that mandate was fiscal year 24, and I did mention that none of the agencies to date have reported full compliance, there's a lot of forward motion. And every agency is using principles of strong zero trust that were enacted in 2020 in those directives in 21, like MFA, and utilizing a centralized single sign-on in every single agency. That wasn't true in 21 and 22. That wasn't true in 23 in some agencies. So big steps forward.
What are the many of the organizations using for MFA? I mean, are they using the PIV cards and the CAT cards for logical access? Is that part of it as well?
Yeah, because traditional, security wasn't looking at defense in depth, as you said, right? It was just, you knew something, you could get in the door. So with a PIV card or a CAT card, now it's actually something that you have, right? So it's another layer of protection that you are able to utilize. And the agencies are all using some component of for if they're handling CUI, of managing with, like, VA uses a PIV for contractors and employees. There are some folks who are cross agency who are using CAC that aren't in DoD, because that program's there's a few other agencies in smaller agencies. They are using device laden MFA instead of like identity cards, which is less secure, but agencies are progressing through the process of implementing zero trust more in depth.
Maturity of the applications to be able to integrate the individual technologies is sometimes what we find as issues with the integration of new concepts and architectures.
I want to give a big shout out to one product that's out there. When Microsoft brought out Entra ID, actually, that, it took some time to integrate, but the functionality is outstanding. It has some really strong integration into those federal systems, and its usability is huge. So that's one of many, many tools, but that one was the first one that I encountered doing real zero trust laden MFA work in VA. And when I was there,
we
all
use
of
Entra
the systems
and
moved over.
quite a few of our implementations. We also use RSA, Secure ID, and Okta, and we use
Okta as well.
Duo as well. So a combination. And typically, the way we do that is also with an ECA token, which is a PIV equivalent and a CAC equivalent. You get those through a couple different providers who then tie themselves cryptographically to the Federal Bridge CA, and then a few others as well, to be able to make sure that you are who you say you are, with submitting documentation and stuff like that as well, to be able to get the tokens issued to you. But
And are you talking
also,
about a physical token?
Yeah, well,
right?
because
Yeah.
like a
Okay.
PIV-CAC,
Yeah.
PIV-CAC is a physical, except it's typically
Token,
issued to government to government officials and government contractors. And Picture ID, there's a whole bunch of standards, on the smart card itself. And then basically what you can do with the ECA tokens, that they're very similar to the PIV-CAC. You go through similar background investigations, and you could use those for medium assurance logins as well, to be able to prove who you are. We use those in a lot of our FedRAMP implementations today. It's a pretty good device that you can. We also use YubiKeys for the same thing or similar as well. Then we tie that with processes on the side to be able to prove who you are as well. And that sometimes is hard, right? To be able to prove who you are, especially in the remote world that we live in today. right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. In
do
my
you think the
prior role in
identity
VA with,
perimeter? Do you think? What? Hold on a second.
oh, good.
Do you
Oh,
think the identity perimeter is a big challenge here for this as well? I mean, to me, it's one of the largest challenges. So,
it is one of the largest challenges for many, many reasons, right? I mean, identity is just so vulnerable right now, and
mhm.
it's not going to get any better at any point in the future. Um, it's always an issue, and I mean, let's call it out. You know why it's always going to be an issue? That human.
Mhm.
That human
Mhm.
whose identity it is. Well, and also non-human identities. I think
No,
non-human
not human.
identity perimeter
Exactly.
is a
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
lot more manageable. A non-human identity perimeter feels a whole lot more manageable to me than the human identity perimeter because it doesn't have the same physicality and, well, unless you're talking about an autonomous robot or something like that.
Well,
Security
there's not too
guards,
many
cleaning,
humans I
whatever.
trust. So that whole zero trust thing, I'm not sure I could get there
Right.
with.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. Well, no, I can get there with zero trust on humans for sure.
I
I'll
was only
always be
teasing.
zero trust with
There you go. There you go.
autonomous beings as well.
It's the
I'll welcome
it's the
them, but I
trust
don't
side.
trust.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the trust side.
Um,
Can get a little
but yeah,
can get a little tricky.
I think the biggest piece of this, right, that with the identity frontier and any other vulnerabilities that need to be addressed and resolved and closed, is that the process is a staged process. You are
Mhm.
hardening in multiple ways, in multiple components that will impact multiple pathways in and out throughout the process of becoming zero trust compliant, right?
Mhm.
So if you're working forward and everything's encrypted that travel in transit, right? And you've got dynamic access decisions happening. Um, there's a whole complete device and asset inventory. If you know what you're protecting really, really well, just again, parallel to CMMC and CUI,
Yep.
and FCI, if you know these things and you go into addressing zero trust as an organization, and you are already practicing strong safety and security posture practices, you're going to have an easy time. If you've
Mhm.
never implemented an MFA solution in your system, and now you have to go figure out how to make that happen and how to have zero trust between all of the different components and these days agentic identities inside of the information boundary. um, you're going to have to work hard and work backwards. So yes, it will be difficult for those folks, but the people who paid attention 5 years ago when it was
Yep.
mandated, 10 years ago when the conversations were starting, and just like, people building toward with automation in mind, right? And 5 years ago are
Right.
now
Mhm.
today seeing the strong benefits. And in 5 more years, the folks who did not build towards automation this past five, they'll be seeing the benefits 5 years
So
on when they
you're kind
have
of
built
leading into
towards it.
my next question, I think. And so from identity to systems, right? What are the
Mhm.
challenges with the current system architectures and the systems that are out there today to be able to accept these principles, to be able to leverage them, to be able to provide the zero trust to the data that people ultimately want to get to, right? That's to me is a huge challenge.
I see it as a challenge. However, it's one for which there are some really easily implementable and already forward thinking solutions, right? Um, Standing privilege goes out the door.
Hmm.
First step, like that's at the top, and that's tough because in a lot of systems, that standing privilege is how the components are able to communicate with each other. Privileges may even be granted in that manner. You've got the possibility of an admin account becoming unable to deliver its workflow if the human in the loop, isn't attentive to it. But that standing privilege needs to be removed from systems, and that is going to
Hmm.
be an organizational challenge for the actual security operations center for your DSO folks. That's where that challenge lies, I think, because they are going to have to build with that security in mind while they're operating in place.
So do
That's
you
the
think that's
biggest
more of a
challenge.
system problem? Well, let me rephrase that because that's not exactly right, and I'll get back to that in just a second. Is it more of a technology problem or is it a process problem? It sounds to me like it's a process problem because the technology can do what almost anything we ask it to do, right? So it's really a people process perspective?
Yeah, I'm going to circle back to the first thing I said about it. It's cultural.
Right.
Zero trust is a cultural component, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the hardest thing here is going to be to change is the people who are
Right.
building these systems. But I don't think that it is I mean, the tech's there, the systems are in place. There are
Mm-hmm.
so many
Mm-hmm.
solution providers that can be incorporated into the authorization boundary, right? Or the CUI boundary, whatever
Right.
your boundary you need to identify is, that can implement the principles of zero trust on behalf of a
Mm-hmm.
CSP, or the principles are so well laid out that there's space for innovation, and it's not a large push of innovation because it's
Mm-hmm.
really just enacting basic security principles that are part of the core, right? They are the core of cybersecurity. You don't give permission, least
Right.
privilege, you know. um, it is a whole lot because, like, for example, like there's 14, if I'm right, components to the zigs, 14 activities, and they lead to, in just discovery, so just to figure out what you're working with and what your plan needs to be, you've got to spend resources, you've got to input time. No matter how you solve this, you've got to do that work on the front end. But then the resources exist out there to ingest. There's solutions. NSA has, solutioning out there as well with the zigs. Is it difficult?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. What's not? Is it a challenge that can't be surmounted? Is there something that's impeding anybody from being able to implement zero trust? I don't think so. That isn't human based, right? Administrative process policy, like you mentioned, the actual technical implementation is so doable.
So
Yeah.
I continue circling back to how do you prove this, right? What's the validation piece of this? You know, and to me, if there's a regulation, then there's compliance, and if there's compliance, then you got to figure out how to, you know, build that validation piece on top of it, build that component around um, um, proving it automatically all the
Yeah.
time. You know,
So validation, I mean, we have these 5 pillars, right? So you have
right?
to verify them or validate them different ways. Also, if you're looking at the zigs, there are different maturity stages and they're in different orders, right? So it's not like you can build one singular uh, dashboard that outputs telemetry about all of
Mm-hmm,
these
mm-hmm.
things, right? Sort of, you go and you have to look at, again, aligning an analogy to the KSIs. Are all data sources and the computing services considered resources in your system? Is every communication secured regardless of its network location? Is access to individual enterprise resources granted on per session, least privilege basis? So how do you prove that, right? So let's look at that access. So does every single resource deployed in your organization or information system, that whichever we're looking at, and in fact, we need to look at both because zero trust is more than just an information system concern. This is a operational end-to-end strategic concern.
That's the
So
that's the
we
next
could
question I
break
was going to ask is the mission impact. So,
we can break down that top level. Is access to individual enterprise resources granted on a per session basis? So we look at each and every repository of information. We look at the privilege settings there. We look at what is required to access the information. Are there identity controls in place? So that's going to take us over to another location in these principles of how is the identity verification implemented? Then we go back to, so are these on a per session basis? Yes. And not only is it a per session basis, here's how we are proving the identity of the session requester and assuring that they have privilege. And at the end of it, you've got an assessment that has looked at, much like KSIs, how
yep.
these goals are achieved, what the implementation methodology is. Instead of, we mentioned this before, is security a checklist? Is
Right.
checking all the check boxes security, or is that compliance? This is about making a security decision and a secure environment. So it's not going to look like checkboxes. It's going to
Right.
look like demonstrating outcomes. It's going to look like being able to show that the work is being done, and it's going to take some future innovation. Maybe somebody has innovated it, and I'm simply not aware of it. Um, Probably Ethan did.
I'm not. So, but then again, I'm not,
Yeah,
I don't know everything. I love to say I do,
yeah,
but I know I
yeah.
don't. So,
I mean, I'm possibly not aware of something, but to my awareness, I don't know of any centralized methodology for assessment that's been highly successful or has case studies behind it. And it's not something that I've dragged too hard for, but it is
right,
something I've looked for. Like, who's assessing this? Who's making sense of it?
right.
And the answer is it's feels like attestation is really what's happening right
Self
now
attestation. That's kind of
because
what it feels like to me, to be honest with you, as well. People are
yeah.
agreeing to the individual things that they said they did, and they're just reporting back on that as well. So,
Ultimately, it
if you
is a trust
okay,
exercise with the integrity of
yep,
the leadership and the agencies
yep,
that are implementing zero trust, right? So we presume that the leadership in our agencies that are saying that they have taken these actions that lead to adherence with the EO and the OMB directive are doing those things, but it is self-attestation. And again, no one has attested to full success.
right, right. So, what do you think the biggest challenges are then to meet the compliance for zero trust for the agencies, and not just the agencies, but also the cloud service providers who provide services to the agencies as well?
Yeah. What are the three? Well, any big challenges are going to
Yeah.
be tied simply to costs right now on the federal
Mm,
side. Getting the
yes.
resources in place to adhere to these directives. That's been a challenge in the cybersecurity space. The OCTO and CIO of every agency has pointed out that this is a challenge, right? Um, Functionally, it is going to be the lack of interoperability and that centralized assessing process, I think, until
Hmm.
some body is formed that will either, uh, you know, make a system, a PMO that assures this, although those,
Mm.
aren't traditionally high success rate overall and have a lot of challenges themselves. So I don't want to call a new one into
Or they
being.
do too much,
Um,
right?
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
usually the case. They try to do too much, and then when you try to do too much, that means you're trying to do everything. And if you try to do everything, you can't get anything done because your focus is everywhere. So,
yeah, yeah. Another really big challenge here is going to be, again, culture principles.
hmm
It is with the CSPs. It's ensuring that there is knowledge and awareness that this is an obligation. The OMB directive directed agencies to complete this work by the end of fiscal year 2024. And now there are new directives out this year insisting that by the end of fiscal year 2027, that they have an assessment of their progress to report to CISA and to OMB on. And so it is a challenge of motivation,
hmm
right? Again, drawing another parallel, how many companies that in one ecosystem in the DIB that had obligation
yeah, yeah,
are potentially in a bad situation or could potentially be, or at least behind that obligation and haven't fulfilled it.
hmm
In the federal space, cloud software in federal agencies, there's a lot of cloud software in federal agencies that has not gone through the FedRAMP process and still has authority to operate with a risk acceptance. So those are matters of motivation, but they're tied to the financial issue in the top
right.
level.
Mm.
Um, I think that the continued attention from the federal leadership, from the executive branch, I feel that industry pushing towards zero trust as a primary basis. And again, those large companies that serve hundreds of millions of customers with their products leading the way is actually highly beneficial. And it opens up a space for more competitors to do the same thing. But
So
until
there's
people
also
are building
commercial
solutions,
there's a commercial capability here as well. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, zero trust is hugely important in a commercial environment, right?
Mhm.
How many times have you been breached? How many times has information about you been extricated from a
Too
company
many,
that has
too many
information
to
about
count.
you?
Too
Exactly.
many to count.
And so as a commercial provider, even if you never do work with the federal government, none of your customers do, so there's no
Mhm.
ancillary requirements here or responsibility. Your customer base wants to know that there's security. It makes your job easier. If you're the
Mhm.
CISO and you need to make sure that information security is has high integrity and is maintained, zero trust is the way to go because it, in its principles and in the structure, it takes away some of the largest risks that are inherent in identity breach, in losing your assets, in access, unwanted access, or exfiltration from your system. Every bad thing that can happen that is cybersecurity, right? Down to phishing attacks. Even if somebody gets phished, zero trust minimizes that because this isn't just a castle gate, right? You don't
Mhm.
have to just get inside. This is more like a room by room security check. You don't get one
Right.
step further until you've proven who you are, and you should. So, if your commercial enterprise could possibly ever have a breach that would impact your dollars or your people or the safety of your customers, then yeah, zero trust needs to be a forefront of information security work.
So we've been going at this about 35 minutes or so. How about questions for me? Do you have anything for me on this?
I I do,
My knowledge on zero trust is deep, but it's not as deep as yours is. So anything you could ask me that maybe could help the audience here as well.
I bet your knowledge is definitely very deep here. Um, yeah, so I'm kind of curious. There's these traditional methods of security, right? That
Mhm.
don't really align with zero trust. There's maybe smaller companies that are doing too much, maybe diving too hard into zero
Mm.
trust. Is there a point in implementation of zero trust where you're getting that minimizing or diminishing returns and the work you're doing can start impeding? Like, is that a risk that could happen?
Well, over engineering can put you out of business, right? I mean, that's basically what you're asking, right? And
Yeah.
that's something that we try to caution, our customers all the time is let's think about what it takes to demonstrate that you're meeting the requirement and then that it adds value. What I mean by value, security value to the overall architecture. So we look at some of the technical implementations and we're like, no, I don't think you really need to do that. Let's focus on what it is you're trying to attempt to do here. And there's 14 other controls that will cover this thing that you need to do. So it's a lot of times it is discussions with engineers and helping them figure out exactly what they got to implement. And sometimes they still over engineer it a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so trying to keep people and engineers to where they don't over engineer it is probably the largest challenge and figuring out exactly the right method because sometimes you can make it too it creates additional performance issues. It can create usability issues as well. And I'm a security guy through and through, but I want to make sure that people can still use our system. I think that's the ultimately the bottom line. If it's too secure, and we have too many layers of checking in here, it could slow us down and we couldn't get anything done. So I think that is key. We're practical, practical
Yeah.
system engineers. We developed the entire system from beginning to end. So.
And so you're building already with zero trust in mind for
Oh,
the customers
absolutely.
that you're.
We've been
Yeah.
building with zero trust since the very beginning. Even before it was zero trust, we've been implemented into our systems. We follow the defense in depth initially, and then now we're really really closely monitoring the zero trust from a technical implementation side, and a lot of it is really the network, and then people how
Yeah.
they access how they actually access the network. I mentioned earlier about the different types of MFA we put into place, but it's also about logging and making sure that you know where they're supposed to go. And then, the least privilege management, that's why I mentioned that earlier as well. That operations piece can be very difficult. We design a multi-account solution inside of AWS. So you have
Hmm.
to have the proper permissions to get into each individual account, which would be your workloads or your applications as well. So not everybody who have access to the system, the overall system, has the doorway into the individual workloads. A lot of our system administrators don't we service the underlying infrastructure, but if we have to get into one of our customers' accounts, we got to ask permission, and then they will give us permission to get in there as well. So that just in time access control is something that we do all the time as well. So I think understanding how the technology is implemented will help people understand sometimes the best way to do it. And anything that you can do automated, that's why I kept asking about the automated assessment pieces, is always what we want to be able to do. Automate and orchestrate is definitely the way to do it. So
Let me turn that back to you, Gary.
yep,
What's
yep.
the automated assessment and a surety that you're utilizing for customers when you're helping them build systems towards zero trust? Like, how are
But
you
I think
doing that?
a lot of it really is ensuring the least privileges piece of it and the just-in-time access control, and then
Yeah.
the network access. People how they actually gaining access to the system, and then what kind of authentication mechanisms are you putting in place in order to be able to access the system. In some cases, we are provided a boundary gateway, and that gateway also provides some additional level of filtering, and then sometimes it's done in DNS. It's also done at the application layer. It's done at the WAF layer. So multiple
In
layers
federal
of
agencies, it's done at
yeah.
that trusted internet connection.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the border gateway, especially like in the Department of Defense, they use the what they call
Mm-hmm.
BCAP. So a lot of
Yes.
that. So they're only allowing the people in who have access. A lot of it resides in that little thing they have carrying around, that the PIV card or the CAC card, the
It
ECA
sure
token,
does.
the UB key, the derived PIV card, those kinds of things. Those are things that integrate well into this cloud world. So, and we've been able
Yeah.
to leverage the solutions that I mentioned earlier to be able to provide that authentication and authorization aspect to give you access, and then the internal controls gives you the just in time access to where you need to go to. So,
Which then solves that cross-cutting capability across all the pillars of
yep.
the visibility and analytics. Then you are able to
Well, that's why
demonstrate
logging,
governance.
right? Logging
Yeah,
and
logging
observability
is
are
huge.
so
Yeah,
important, and that's
yeah,
to me is one of the key items. Logging is also key. It's a supplemental service to give you the observability and visibility piece into what you're doing. And
yeah.
we're big SIM guys. We have a security operations center that we run, and logs can overwhelm you. So you want to make sure you're only looking at the logs that you need to be looking at as well. So, good question. Good question. So my
Indeed.
last question to you is, all right, so we're here. Where are we going next? Where is it going next? What's the next steps here?
Yeah, I think that over the rest of this year, right? I'm saying this with many of the changes and rapid advancements and acceptance of automation and new EOs coming out, OMB directives. This is all part of the shape of the ecosystem. I
Hmm.
think that by the end of this actual calendar year, not the fiscal year, um, we're going to see another OMB directive come out that has timelines that are going to be taken very seriously by the new leadership in the federal civilian agencies. Cybersecurity has been a huge pressure of the current administration, and 2026 has been a year of a lot of movement towards
Good.
change, forward progress, automation, and so I think that for 27, we will see some commercial providers coming out with tools that help manage some of the more esoteric components. And
Hmm.
we're going to definitely see commercial providers, like big, large commercial providers, coming out with like easy to use products that will be at every convention and
Cool.
lecture
I like that.
circuit.
I like that.
I think
I
so.
love cloud native services. They just
Same.
work, you know,
Yeah.
and they're easy to provision. They're easy to configure. And they're easy to leverage inside of overall infrastructure. I always like to say I'm a pipe guy. I like laying the pipes to where they need to go to, Yeah, and as long as people are authorized to go through those pipes, then I'm perfectly fine with
Cloud native and
allowing.
containerization,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and life is good. Micro
Great.
segmentation across all of the functions. It's yeah, I do think that it'll be a busy year and a half in the
Yep.
face of zero trust. By the end of 29, by the end of 29, this won't even be like a challenge in agencies.
It's
It'll
it's
just be a
almost like
function
how
of how it
cloud was
operates.
a few years ago, right? So if you think
Yeah,
about that maturity of the cloud and the services that ultimately get built, I think everybody scramble to do a certain thing, when that EO comes out or that new regulation comes out, but the technology hasn't quite caught up yet. But the technology always catches up, so you
indeed.
got to be able to figure out that what are your plans and then who you driving, to help you build those next generation of security tools to be able to enable this type of protection. For our most critical data. I mean, this is kind of serious data that we need to make sure that folks don't get their hands on. So I think that is really where the focus is providing the technology, providing the automation, because humans can't keep up with the amount of logs and changes that go through. So we have to have as much
It's not
automation
possible.
in here
Especially
as
in a large
possibly.
agency, because that's so
Yep.
much traffic, so much interaction. There's
Oh,
there's
right.
hundreds and hundreds of information systems before our expected doubling of the FedRAMP marketplace that we talked about last time, Gary.
Yep.
Hundreds
There
and
you go.
hundreds of information systems in these agency system inventories that all need to meet these principles and deliver together. It will take time, though. But
There you go.
again, the uptake happens over time, and then as the agency learns what they really need, right, because that does take time as well, right? If
It
you've ever
does.
been in an agency or you've had
Oh,
agency
yeah.
customers, their needs evolve, and the industry will evolve with it until we get to a point where we're delivering the way it needs to be done, and then there will be competitive options across the marketplace, right?
There
And
you
then
go.
zero trust is everywhere. We get to go find the then by then we'll be working on the
The next
light
thing,
based
whatever the next
quantum
thing. There you go. Oh gosh.
quantum lasers for data storage.
There
How
you
are they going
go.
to exfiltrate from those?
Yeah, that's a little
Yeah,
mind-boggling for me, but the time's moving fast, and you got to be able to keep up with it. And Michael, I appreciate your time again for coming on to the show. And
thanks for having me.
as always, this has been another episode of Behind the Shield. You may not always find me here, but you're always going to find somebody from Infusion Points behind the shield. Thanks for your time, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Thank you very much. Talk to you guys soon.